All right, Mopar people, welcome back to the channel. I'm just Mopar Joe. Today's a big day. We get to finally mock the LA 360 into the 65 Coronet. I don't have the transmission back from it yet, but what I did get in was this Transdapt kit. Check that out. It is supposed to have the correct mounts and the correct rubbers, rubber pads, whatever you want to call them, isolators for the 65 Coronet block. So you need something like that. The double lugs go into the frame. And here's an example. That will bolt to the block. So I think both of their brackets have, no, that one's got 3. So 3 holes, 4 holes. I'm gonna get them bolted up to the engine block, show you that real quick. Big old bag of bolts. I also have a 4-speed bell housing I'm gonna stick on here with a flywheel, just so I can have something to kind of stabilize it in the back. And it's not just relying on the front engine mounts to stay in place, but should be fairly simple. I'm hoping this stuff will all bolt in real nicely and we'll be ready for our transmission to get here. Until then, I can be doing things like finishing my lines for the AC compressor. I can maybe run the exhaust. That'd be cool. I've been looking forward to that. Just mocking up little stuff, doing wiring. I have an FEO ignition box I need to put in place. All that fun stuff that needs to happen right now. So the problems begin as soon as I open the box. They sent me, I got 6 of these bolts and 12 washers that are ginormous. You can see there. Pretty sloppy on the bolts. I would say that is not the correct size washer for that bolt. Some people will argue, but that washer actually fits nicely on the motor mount side of that. Big, I would call that probably, that's probably a 1/2 inch. This is 7/16. See the difference? So they give you a lock nut, a huge washer. But if I use one of their others on here, it's pretty nice. I like a pretty nice tight fit. Not too tight to where it would bind it, but I would pick that washer over that great big one. You may disagree with me. Anyway, so here's my issue. We have 6 of these bolts with these ginormous washers. And our motor mounts themselves, see this one, they're kind of, they have to go, they're side specific is what I'm trying to say. They are not the same. So that one would go here. If I use their ginormous washer that they sent, it'll drop in okay on that one. This dude here is a nice tight fit, and it might, I don't even know if I'll be able to use the washer. Check this out. See how close that is? Like, I'm guessing I can get that nut down on there. Let me try one of these washers. That's not working. That's definitely not working. So what I may have to do is just use the lock nut. And even then, it's still raised up like that. There it goes down some. So that might crush into place. But you just see how tight that nut is against here. Not totally sure if I can get a socket on it. So that means I'll have to stand here, probably have to lock it in the vise to go with an open-ended wrench to tighten that down. So that sucks pretty good. Also, you'll notice how far this sticks out here. So if that's sticking out that far, if I had used their bolt from the inside, there's no way to start that nut onto there unless you already have the nut started onto there. Also, they're ginormous washers that they want me to use. I'd have to lay it in place. See how all this can become a headache. So what I'm probably going to end up using for these bolts are the original factory hardware bolts from the Poly. They're a lot nicer. They're not super long, excessively long. Let me show you how long these are. 3-lug side. Goes in like this. Typically, I would put my bolts from the inside and tighten my nuts out. But in this case, that back one may have to go from the rear unless I use my stock bolts. But you see, I cannot. That bolt is too long to even start any direction. So already they have given you too long of bolts to be able to use with the kit correctly, I would think. If I went this way and get that one in, if I want to run these from the inside, then I would need to run my rear one from the back through like that. But you see how close that is. That sucks. That bolt's just far too long. The others stick out the front okay. So here's another issue with their ginormous washers that they recommend for this. If you put that onto there, it would crush into the side of the block. On that front bolt, if you use the other size washer that they recommend for the bottom mounts, let me get this off. It also interferes, just barely. So it would work. That tighter washer right there does not look like factory equipment at all. The bracket itself looks pretty nice, like something that could be factory, but these bright, shining, I don't know, they're probably grade 8 bolts or something. That's good that they're good and strong, but if they're wrong, they're wrong. I mean, it is what it is. So if I have all that in place, let's find my mount that goes through the bottom. Aha, there's the other problem I needed to show you. As that comes through the bottom, if it was bolted into place, the stud of that hits the block. So even if it was bolted in place very tightly and I pulled all the slack away from it, it's still, I'm gonna have to shorten that lug to even be able to use that. So something to think about. Just kind of sucks. And I don't have my sides mixed up. I'll show you that now. The other one is their 4-hole special. If you were to stick it in place, you have the ginormous amount of space in there. That's just no bueno. Switch her to the other side. She's almost perfect. There's a little bit of gap right here, but I think I might could actually stick that in my vise and bend it to where it's not so flared out. That will look pretty nice there. Get you a better shot. So no problem with this side. You have that extra bolt hole open on the bottom. I've seen the old school engines even have a really long bolt that went through all the way through here and out the back side. I could do that, I guess. But I'll probably just reuse the stock bolts that it had on the other engine. So let me get these mounted up and we'll keep pushing forward. Here's where I ended up on this side. Trim that off. You can get about a sheet of paper between that nut and that ear. I could not use the factory nut, or the nut that they sent with it rather, because it was too tall. The locking part of it would hit the ear and I didn't want to grind that off. I was able to use the factory washer there. On the front side, I got my own kind of thin washer and replaced there, and that bolt is just almost to the end. So feel pretty good about that. Switch over to the other side. I had to run these 2 bolts from the front, mostly because that one would interfere and it wouldn't go in from the back with that tall nut. So I could have cut that off and all that. I think it's gonna be fine. We're gonna see how it drops in. Both these are slotted and slotted, so that should be pretty easy to drop straight down in if they have it correctly situated with the block. So if we look straight on at this example like that port, those bolts would be about in line with that hole, or those studs rather. And we come to this side, the studs are a little bit further behind the hole, almost lined up with the spark plug. So it's going to be interesting to see how that works, because this side, driver's side, actually looks a little further forward than that side. So we shall see. All right, I think Barney's ready. We got her hanging out here. My old dirty bell housing is bolted up. And I went ahead and threw on the flywheel. It does have a weight bolted to the inside. I don't know if you can see it in there or not. Probably on the around the other side, but it basically bolts in here. Just if I want to start this engine, all I got to do is throw a starter on there now, and I could run it in the car. We look at clearance, that's probably 8 or 10 inches. This needs to go back 4 or 5 inches. So I think we should be able to lower it. I'm gonna get y'all set up here so I can work my old engine hoist. See how this thing fits in. There's that side view. Looks like my mount needs to come back maybe 6 inches or so. That's gonna hit in 2 inches unless it drops. So our K-frame, I need to go back just a little bit to clear that oil pan. So everything's looking pretty nice. I'm gonna get my floor jack and get underneath there to get on that bell housing and keep sliding her backwards. So I got the other side's bracket in. She dropped right down pretty nicely, wide open on this side. The engine is a little high in the back, you can tell, but this bracket, I was like, why is it so far off? I do believe, if you'll remember, it has 4 holes. I bet you $1 to a donut I got that in upside down, and when I flip it, it will bring my 2 studs up and back to about right here. So I give this a little shove, it should drop in. I'm gonna try that right now. Oh, here it is. Got her flipped around. See, the little cut off corner goes towards the back. That's how the other side is, and it makes perfect sense. I went ahead and stuck a couple bolts in this header to mock it up. It cleared just fine. The other side, if I remember correctly, I think it was Mopar Man 1978 who said, those headers, you're gonna have to clearance that front tube if you use them. And sure enough, it is touching right there. Excuse me. So what I believe I'll do is cut off, come straight up with it, and then make my curve into here, kind of like a natural sweep. Like you'd see other headers. I'm not gonna crowd my plugs or anything like that, but right now, it's just laying in there. I've got my chain hooked to the front of the intake. You can see this big piece of flat metal here I use as a washer. Went down and circled, and that's what's holding the engine up. I thought about sticking a block of wood on top of the center link, but I think that's kind of poor practice, or, you know, if you're gonna do it very quickly and remove it. But the way this is sitting right now, I don't think there's an issue. But yeah, it looks a lot better with the engine setting in. I showed you all the complications of that kit. And I did have to trim that big nut, I'm sorry, the stud there coming out of that, so it wouldn't touch the other bolt. But there she is. Hopefully it helped somebody out there in 65 Coronet land if you're swapping to an LA series engine, getting the old poly out. I appreciate y'all watching, and we will keep pushing forward on the old Coronets.